Eagles Entertainment.
The journey of the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 21st pick in the NFL draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. The 2020 NFL draft, it's in the books. It's over and done with. This has been a crazy weekend. We've got a ton to cover. The Eagles made a bunch of selections today. We're going to break it down now. It's time for Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, as I welcome in Chris McPherson and Ben Fennell. Guys, the draft's over. Congratulations to you guys. I hope it was a great weekend for both of you in terms of what you guys were doing. C-Mac, I know you were hard at work with the app and the website for PhiladelphiaEagles.com. Ben, I know you've been doing everything with the broadcast. I thought it was a really smooth broadcast on our end for PhiladelphiaEagles.com with Eagles Draft Central. Shout out to Melissa Kelly, Ray Doyle, David Sullivan, everybody behind the scenes did an outstanding job. I thought everything was really, really smooth. Let's get into this, though. We've got a bunch of guys to cover in a short amount of time. Kavon Wallace is a guy that we've been talking about. We've been pounding the table for Kavon Wallace. It seems like since the middle of the fall, Ben, and now he's an Eagle. Really, really excited to see how he fits into this secondary. He can do so many different things.
Yeah, I feel like he was one of your draft darlings going back to the summer and just being one of those kind of really smart, instinctive players with a lot of experience. Doesn't have a whole lot of, athletic traits or those kind of upside traits because, he's a little bit shorter. He only runs in the 4.5s but he just looks like those NFL bodies that are just going to carve out a 12 to 15 year career. The Antoine Bethays of the world, the Tony Jeffersons of the world, the guys that you could play on the back end, in the box, be a nickel cover guy. This guy has tons of experience, 44 career games at Clemson, and we know the competitive nature of Clemson over the last 3 and 4 years. He was also an all-state player out of the state of Virginia on both sides of the ball. So this is a guy with a receiver pedigree that has kind of a my ball approach. I know the big knock on him was not having that production on the ball coming into the season, but he had 2 picks, 10 PBUs this year, and really put a lot of that to bed. Really interesting, experienced player, Fran.
Yeah, what fans are going to absolutely love about him, Fran and Ben, is the fact that at Clemson, he was roommates with Brian Dawkins' son. Because everyone automatically hears, safety out of Clemson. They think of Brian Dawkins, of course. And lo and behold, Kavon Wallace actually was roommates and is good friends with the Dawkins family. And another Eagles tie, Wallace, who was so impressive in his press conference with the media, explained that he did an internship with the league office in New York City and worked closely at times with Troy Vincent and had a lot of talks about the game and what it takes to succeed. And another interesting note about Wallace is the fact that he's the first member of his family just to graduate high school. But his mother pushed him and said that, I'm not kidding, the first member of his family to graduate high school, but his mother pushed him, said, that's not good enough. I want you to keep going. And he earned his degree at Clemson. And he was a part of 3 teams that went to the national title, 2-time national champion, just the intangibles on top of what he produced on the field. Just outstanding young man.
Wow. I did not know that. That's pretty remarkable. And when you just kind of put a ribbon on him, everything that Ben said. Look, one of the things that stood out to me, and I wrote it down numerous times while I was watching it, was smooth, natural, instinctive, just a really instinctive, smart football player, really tough, competitive, versatile, all those things you want to check the boxes with Kavon Wallace. You certainly have. Let's get to the next one here. Jack Driscoll, the starting right tackle for the last 2 years for the Auburn Tigers in the SEC, transferred from UMass, went immediately up to the SEC and started from day one. This is a guy, to me, Jack Driscoll, really, really impressive. Ben, give me your thoughts on Jack Driscoll.
Yeah, he stood out. I think we were trying to watch Prince Tega Winago earlier this season, and my eyes kept drifting over to the right tackle spot, not knowing who this kid was, but he just looked really solid, really smooth getting out of his stance, had no problem washing some of these SEC edge rushers past the quarterback, had pretty good strength at the point of attack and washing down defensive ends and defensive tackles and double teams. I don't know if it was just the Auburn right tackle, the look, the area, but he just kind of had that Braden Smith feel that ended up being a nice second-round pick to the Indianapolis Colts 2 years ago, and has carved out a starting spot there with the Colts. Just a really interesting player that kind of caught our eye earlier this year watching another player. But like you had mentioned, UMass transfer, he was a grad transfer, only 1 year in the SEC, and he looked apart for him.
Yeah, to me, I mean, watching him, he was a guy that, again, when he was at UMass, played left tackle, played left guard. He goes to Auburn, plays right tackle. So you have that versatility. I think he might be a little bit of a better fit on the inside when it's all said and done. Athletic kid, really smart. He's got some physical limitations in terms of his length, right? But he understands how to mitigate that. He understands how to overcome that. So when I look at Jack Driscoll, just the way that he plays, really smart player, natural bender, knows how to use his hands. I really like the pick. C-Mac, what were your takeaways from Jack Driscoll?
Just a smart addition, looking at the Eagles' offensive line. Jason Peters, is a free agent at this point. Big V is signed on with the Detroit Lions. You really need to figure out what the depth is going to be. You do have Andre Dillard, last year's first-round pick, ready to take over a left tackle, but what's the depth going to be like along the offensive line? And to get someone who has that tackle guard experience, so instrumental. And, you go back to character and intangibles and things that are going to help, the culture of the locker room. Someone who you guys mentioned was a grad transfer, earned his MBA at Auburn. So really had a dream, a desire to get to a Power 5 conference, to play football, and worked his way from UMass to Auburn. So kudos to him, and a smart pick here for the Eagles as a mid-round selection, bolstering the offensive line.
Yeah, again, just a really, really smart, versatile player. And early on, as a backup, that versatility is going to help him be active on game days. This is a guy that can fill in at a number of different roles, has shown that he can do that at the college level. I really like the pick. Really, really smart player that I really enjoyed watching on film. Next one here, we want to hit on the speedster, the wide receiver from Boise State, John Hightower, ran in the low 4.4s. C-Mac, you and I watched him up close at the Shrine Bowl. Thought he got better every day down there, made some really nice catches late in the week. But this is a guy that can work downfield. Ben, I know you've studied him on film. We've been talking about him back to the fall. I know our friend Dane Brugler was very, very high on John Hightower back during the college season. Ben, what are your thoughts on John Hightower?
Yeah, I thought this is the influx of speed and playmaking and explosive nature that this offense needed, and they added to this roster with authority, starting with John Hightower. A little bit of an undersized frame. He's 6'1", 183, but he shows up with that 4.4 speed. And I like just the usage in Boise State, whether it was the double moves, a lot of stuff in the backfield, jet sweeps, end arounds, getting the balls in his hands, not just being a vertical stretcher, but also a horizontal stretcher, and a lot of those gadget yak opportunities. He doesn't have a huge frame. He's not going to break a lot of tackles with his size, but he's shifty in the open field, and he takes away angles first and foremost in the open field. 12 plays of 40-plus yards the last 2 seasons. And the interesting thing is, had to play with a true freshman quarterback this year, and then a veteran 4-year quarterback the year before with Brett Rippon. So he's seen a little bit of some youth at the quarterback position and some veteran presence as well. He's produced in both systems. So a guy that just seemed to take that same kind of mold that Darius Slayton had last year coming out of Ole Miss, I believe, and was a day 3 pick to the Giants. He did one thing really well, and that was run. And that typically always has a place on Sundays.
C-Mac, I know we got to see him, and we were impressed with the speed up close. What were your takeaways from Hightower?
So it's so funny. A little embarrassing story on my end, real quick. So Ben mentions Darius Slayton. For some reason, for the life of me, I thought Slayton went to Boise State. And at the Shrine Bowl, I went to John Hightower, and I was like, what was like seeing Slayton have his success, the success he had as a rookie? And Hightower was kind of like, yeah, I guess it was good. And then it dawned on me. I'm like, I totally messed this question up. So it's so funny that you brought up Slayton. But the speed, when you're looking at day 3 guys, you want extreme traits, if possible, that they'll give them a chance to succeed. And that's exactly what John Hightower has with that top-end speed.
Yeah, to me, watching him, kind of shades of like a Will Fuller coming out of Notre Dame, right? I think he's built very similarly. Obviously, has that long speed. Some of the same issues that Will Fuller has in terms of being able to finish at the catch point, but he's got that game breaking ability as well. So you're going to have those home runs, and you're going to have some drops as well. But Hightower certainly made some outstanding catches vertically down the field. This is a guy certainly that can fly. Next one here, Sean Bradley, the linebacker from Temple. Look, guys, I'm going to take a subtle flex. I can't take credit for this stat, okay? I can't take credit for this. But Ralph Russo for the AP. Ralph Russo for the AP. The number of players drafted by the NFL from 2016 to 2020, so over the last 4 years, okay? Florida State, 15. Temple, 15. Same exact number of guys from Florida State have been drafted as have been from Temple. Nebraska, another college football blue blood, just 8 in that time, so half. So from the big-time program of the Temple Owls up on North Broad Street, the Eagles pluck a linebacker in Sean Bradley, a guy who ran really, really well out in Indianapolis. You could see that speed. This is a guy who was a high school running back and defensive back. So he's got that athletic background. He can make plays from sideline to sideline, but also a tough kid in the middle as well. Will come down and will pop you. Ben, give us your thoughts here on Sean Bradley.
Really interesting linebacker with good speed, good playmaking ability. When he gets to the ball carrier, he gets there with authority and is not shy about knocking that ball loose and getting the ball back for his offense. Really interesting player here. And he was a local kid just across the bridge from New Jersey and Rancocas Valley High School. That may sound familiar because they have 3 former first-round picks in the NFL, Franco Harris, Irving Fryer, and Alonzo Spellman. Kind of interesting in just a random public school in South New Jersey. But Sean Bradley is a 3-year starter next to Chappelle Russell, who also got drafted from that Temple defense today. So just a really good physical linebacker that also has the athletic profile as well. I think when I watched him on tape, I didn't see that 4.15 speed. I saw more of a physical profile, but the fact that he could show up to Indianapolis and put up a low 4.5 time, that tells me he could probably contribute on special teams and maybe has a little bit more of a sub-package profile than I thought.
The interesting thing with him also at Temple, he earned one of those single-digit jersey numbers as one of the toughest players on the team. So that's also something to keep in mind. And when you're going back to these high character kids, these intangibles they're bringing to the team. Fran, the stat that I thought you were going to bring up, and I apologize if I get this wrong, but Temple has had a player drafted in each of the last 5 drafts, and that's the longest streak by any non-Power 5 school.
Oh, so, I mean, it just keeps on. The legend continues for the Temple Owls for sure. But to me, and I was there, when they instituted that Temple Tough tradition of the single-digit numbers, and that's not taken lightly. That's not something that they just give out. It's like, oh, we got to get someone to fill in number 8 this year. No, every year the numbers get stripped out when someone graduates. So when Sean Bradley, he graduates, that number's dangling now for those guys. And if no one gets it, no one gets it. They don't just give them out. So, for Sean Bradley to have that over the last couple of years, I think that speaks to his off-field demeanor. I had one person tell me that's been around the program over the last 4 years that he's been one of the most well-respected players, super hard worker. And this is the quote, probably the most respected leader and player in that program. I talked about this on the show afterwards on Eagles Draft Central. The goal line stop he made against Maryland this year against Anthony McFarland on the goal line, huge play. I forgot 2 years ago against Maryland when they had the big upset against the Terps, he had the pick 6 that kind of changed that game as well. So this is a guy who's come up in the clutch against some of the best opponents on the schedule. Sean Bradley, very, very intriguing player. Another linebacker with speed. Speaking of speed, the next selection here, Quez Watkins, the wide receiver from Southern Miss. Ben, give us the scouting report here on Quez Watkins.
Well, also, I just have to say, it just feels right having a Sean Bradley back around Broad Street in Philadelphia. It just fits the sports scene out there. So great to get another Sean Bradley back around the stadiums. But Quez Watkins, another guy that's kind of in the John Hightower mold. But if it's that believable, he's faster. Same kind of frame, 6 foot, 185. They're going to look like clones walking down the hallway in the NovaCare facility. But he showed up to Indianapolis running 4.35, one of the faster all-round performances of the week out there. And when you put on his tape, there's one thing and one thing well, and that's run. He's not as dynamic as John Hightower with the gadget stuff, the jet sweeps, the end arounds, the yards after catch. What Quez Watkins does is run and run deep. He had 9 catches of 40 yards this year alone.
Wow.
So he had 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, 64 catches this year, averaging 18 yards a catch. The issue is he does have a couple boneheaded drops down the field, as John Hightower does as well. But John Hightower's drops are a lot more underneath on the quick game stuff, the shallows, the slants when it gets on them fast. Quez occasionally can get bumped off his route or kind of get smothered by some bigger cornerbacks, which happens with these kind of 180-pound receivers that can run really fast. So a lot of the names I've written down, you already mentioned Will Fuller for John Hightower, Fran, but Travis Benjamin, Kenny Stills, Darius Slayton, that type of mold, that instant speed that you want from your 4th or 5th receiver on the roster, that's what Quez Watkins does for you waking up every morning.
So obviously speed and athleticism was a major tenet of this draft class for the Eagles. And this was something that Next Gen Stats put out on Twitter, that the Eagles posted the most athletic day 3 score of every team in terms of the players drafted, just showing how important it was. And this is something, again, Howard Roseman said, we got to get younger. We got to get volume in this draft. You look at all the players selected, and we've got to get faster. And he stayed true to those words by getting John Hightower and then Quez Watkins here. And also the one aspect of their games, and you had Jalen Reagor into this, the return ability. It's now all of a sudden, whichever of these guys maybe isn't, in your rotation as a receiver, can still be active on game day and be a dynamic game breaker in the return game, because these guys have that return ability as well.
And Fran, if I could just read off some of these notes here with Quez Watkins, because I described kind of a frail frame guy with some drop issues, but I wrote a guy that's extremely competitive, will fight for the ball. He'll come back to the ball. He's not afraid to try to high point the ball in any situation. He's fearless over the middle. Didn't run a lot of routes over the middle, but when he did have some over routes or some digs, he had no problem kind of working in traffic there. Some sudden routes on slants and snapping his head at the break points. The one issue I have with his usage, he was almost exclusively a right side of the formation receiver, so he's going to have to kind of learn the nuance of playing from both sides of the offense, and extremely explosive after the catch. They just didn't give him a whole lot of yards after catch opportunities, but really intriguing, explosive athlete.
We're talking
intriguing, about it's just real quick to add to what Ben was saying there about his personality. He definitely came across in his video conference call as an alpha dog mentality, that he's not coming in to back down. He's not coming in to be shy because he's one of a number of receivers in this draft class going to the Eagles or additions at the wide receiver position. He's coming to win a job.
And that's what it looks like on tape, C-Mac. He's small, but he's feisty and competitive, and he might mix it up a little bit this summer. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a lot of fun to watch, not only making the big plays over the top, the return ability, maybe some punt gunning, and just having that feisty competitiveness. I think we're going to hear his name called a couple times this summer.
You guys both brought up special teams. That'll be big in camp, and then also obviously during the season in terms of who is active. But making the 53 special teams will be a big part of it. Guys, we're talking speed receivers. The Eagles acquire a veteran here today. Marquise Goodwin, they acquired in a trade with the San Francisco 49ers in a swap of 6th-round selections. C-Mac, what's the stuff you've gotten from the Marquise Goodwin trade? Obviously, the Eagles get a guy who has done it in the league, but another person who's got wheels.
Got wheels. That's the biggest thing. The common theme here is just adding speed, and this is someone who's done it, at the NFL level, was drafted highly by the Buffalo Bills, spent the last 3 seasons with the 49ers, has had success in his career. Injuries limited him in 2019. The Niners were looking to move on, and the Eagles more than welcome to bring him on, because I think there were some questions in terms of that they didn't address the receiver position in free agency. And Howard Roseman kept saying, it's not just free agency, okay? This is not the only time to acquire players, to acquire veteran players. There are other avenues to do so, and he showed that here that he's going to bring in a veteran, because you're bringing in a lot of young guys. It's going to be hard to make the transition from the college game to the NFL, and even though you have a couple, 3 receivers drafted, 2 of these guys are day 3 guys, okay? So you don't know how they're going to pan out. So at the very least, you give yourself a little bit of an insurance policy, a little bit of a cushion by bringing in a veteran who has had success at this level. And this is a guy who certainly can fly. I think it was a 4.27, I believe, at the scouting combine. was training to be an Olympic long jumper, had previously competed in the Olympics in London, was looking to win a spot for the Tokyo Games, but of course the Tokyo Games were moved to next year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So just outstanding athleticism, but you have a veteran here. I think a lot of people were clamoring for a veteran in this receiver group to add to the mix who had speed. Well, the Eagles have done it here in a trade with the Niners.
Yeah, he was a guy, I remember watching him at the Senior Bowl the year he came out of Texas, and he was a big-time athlete. He had a great week down there. You could see that speed, and he's done it again. He's a guy who has done it in the NFL level. So even if the injuries have mounted a little bit too much, you've still acquired some of these younger guys. And again, to go the other way, if the younger guys don't work out this summer, you've also acquired a veteran who's done it. So it's going to be just great competition here this summer with the Eagles receiving corps. I can't wait to watch this group take the field during training camp. Guys, let's get to these last two picks here. We've already talked about this player's teammate, but we briefly mentioned him. But the left tackle for the Auburn Tigers, Prince Tega-Wanogho. If you're going to compare Driscoll with Tega-Wanogho, I feel like he's a little bit more dancing bear, right? And I made the joke that the Eagles, this is not the first time that they've selected royalty from the Auburn Tigers program along the offensive line. They took King Dunlap a few years ago. Now instead of getting the King, they get the Prince with Prince Tega-Wanogho. He's got light feet, and I like his anchor. He's got the ability to stand his ground against a bull rush. There are some technique things he's got to work through. You might say he's a better guard than a tackle, but with his foot quickness, I think he's got the ability to stick on the outside. He's a very, very intriguing player. Ben, what have you seen from Prince Tega-Wanogho?
Yeah, really interesting player. He showed up on Bruce Feldman's freak list, which we always love to see from our prospects, just putting in the work in the weight room, impressive bench press, squat, running a sub 540 and jumping 32 inches. I'm not sure he was able to do that at the combine this year. But he's a guy that came into school at 260 and then was consistently playing at 310, 315. So he's a guy that has gone through the body transformation, has really put in the work off the field. Strong hands, large frame, athletic, like you had just said, Fran, so light on his feet. And I think he's a little bit more strong than powerful. And it's one of those discussions we always talk about, the nuance of traits and what it means to be strong or powerful. But I don't really think he's a mauler, but he uses his length, his feet, and size in combination all together to get himself in the right position. And I feel like his body, his head, his shoulders get in the right position. Now let's see if we can get him more powerful and move people where we need to move them. So he also has some experience at right tackle. He played 74 snaps there in 2017. He can mix up his punch and play with independent hand usage, which I know Jeff Statlin's really going to love. But he's a guy that played a lot of ball in the SEC. Kind of a raw prospect coming in, but has put a lot of good stuff on tape, and I think he's still ascending as a prospect, Fran.
Remember, he was in first-round mock drafts back in the summer. Even in the early fall, this was a guy that was very highly thought of. For the Eagles to get him in the sixth round certainly has the ability. C-Mac, what were some of the takeaways you got from him on his press conference with the media?
Look, the thing is that he was born in Nigeria, one of 9 children, 7 sisters, another brother, earned a basketball scholarship. First played soccer and then was playing basketball and earned a scholarship to a prep academy in Alabama. That's how he ended up in the United States, lived with the family, with the basketball coach, and just trying to, learn American ways. He went to the football practice and the coaches saw his athleticism and said, we got to get this guy on the field. So the thing was, he came over as a junior, a high school junior, but he was so smart in the classroom that they basically moved him a grade ahead. So he ended up only playing 1 year of football, and he did it as a defensive end, but was good enough to get multiple scholarship offers, including to Auburn. The only problem was he fractured his leg playing basketball, the sport he went over there for, fractured his leg, and that partially led to him redshirting his freshman year. But then maybe there was a blessing in disguise because he did scout team work on the D-line, but then his redshirt freshman year, he was moved over to the offensive line, and the rest is history. But his family is still in Nigeria, just an amazing story. We went through this with Jordan Mailata a couple of years ago, with the amazing trek coming over from Australia. There's another one here, another international pipeline here going from Nigeria to Philadelphia.
And C-Mac, the really interesting thing with some of these international players, there always seems to be a trend. And Fran, we've talked about it before, especially with offensive linemen. They all have backgrounds playing soccer. Their feet are just different than everybody else. That it's kind of built in the American pedigree that, soccer isn't as dominant. To see these guys that are 6'6", 300 pounds that have played soccer before, you see it in their feet, in their movement patterns. And we always say he has light feet and fluid and can fly out of his stance. There's a reason. A lot of times that soccer and just having that kind of pedigree of using your feet early on in your life really kind of aids and assists him in his football play.
Well, guys, let's wrap this one up. We'll go to the front seven now, where the Eagles selected Casey Toole in the 7th round, the edge rusher from the Stanford Cardinal, was their outside linebacker, typically to the strong side in that 3-4 scheme. This is a guy that I studied, and I like the play personality for Casey Toole because this guy did a little bit of everything. He'll set an edge, he'll drop back and play in coverage, and he'll also get after the quarterback as well. I believe 19 sacks in his career. I have to go back and look at the exact number. Only a handful of sacks. He was only a one-year starter, but this was a guy, to me, who also really stood out with his usage in stunts and twists. He goes to the combine, has a really strong workout, and to me, that's why he ultimately ended up being a 7th-round pick because, if you have those guys who are 250 pounds and test like he does, you don't want him to hit undrafted free agency. You want to make sure you can get him into the building. Casey Toole is a guy that's got athletic upside. I talked with him for a long time at the podium at his press conference out in Indianapolis because he was just a great kid, a great guy to talk to. I got a lot of information out of him. I've got scouting reports on some of the best offensive linemen in the Pac-12, some guys going back to Stanford. He gave me some great information. It was great talking to Casey Toole. Excited to talk to him again once the NovaCare complex opens back up and the players are returning for camp. But, Casey Toole, really, really impressive player. If he's able to come in and compete for a job and win, I'm excited to see how the coaches decide to use him because, again, I think he's got that potential to be really effective on different stunts and twists up front along the defensive line.
Yeah,
well, Fran, I feel like he could do a lot of different things for the defense. And he reminds me of a couple players that have come out the past couple of years, whether it's Ty Summers out of TCU last year going to the Packers, also a 7th-round pick, where you don't really know what they are. Are they an edge rusher? Are they an off-the-ball backer? Are you a special teams guy? Are you a designated rush end? I think they can do a lot of different things. Blanking on the player. I think his name is Leon Jacobs, also for Wisconsin 2 or 3 years ago. Similar type of outside linebacker, defensive end pedigree that I think figuring out their positional fit, I think, is just getting started in that conversation. I think he go a lot of different directions in the NFL.
Yeah, the big thing with him, a finalist for the academic Heisman, the William Campbell Trophy. 8 sacks in his 1 year in 2019, his 1 year as the full-time starter. I think the biggest thing is you bring in someone with those intangibles to push the other guys on the roster. There's a lot of potential. Okay, that's the big thing. There's a lot of potential, a lot of youth in that defensive line, but the Eagles need someone to emerge. I've said this before with Vinny Curry and his about 400 or so snaps that need to be replaced this season. They need someone to take a step up. Brandon Graham is getting another year older. Derek Barnett's in a crucial year for him where they got to figure out his long-term plan. So they need some of these young guys to step up. So it's great getting some more competition in here. And I'm not shocked at all that they addressed the position here.
Yeah, and, as we talked about, a lot of speed, high character guys with upside. Really, really fun class here that the Eagles have put together in the 2020 NFL Draft. We're going to break it down as a whole later on this week. Guys, really appreciate the time. It's been a crazy couple of days. We've gone through the grind that was the first round, then day 2, now day 3, and you guys always stuck around. We made sure we knocked out this podcast so we can get it out to all the listeners. We'll be talking to you guys again soon. Everybody at home, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll talk to you again in a couple weeks here, or a couple days here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.